when you need unbiased information, balanced analysis, reviews, and insight on the policies and programs that concern you. Listen to City Talks with Ruben Abati. Be a part of it. Call 0700 1051 1051 to lend your voice on topics and help shape our country for the better.
My name is Ruben Abati. I will be your host on City Talks from noon to 1 p.m. every Saturday. Join me as we dissect major issues of public interest. You will be glad you did.
City Talks with Ruben Abati on your number one lifestyle station, City 1051. From noon to 1 p.m. every Saturday.
Good afternoon and welcome to City Talks on your number one lifestyle station, City 1051 FM. City Talks is your trusted show for in-depth discussions on pressing current political and human interest issues shaping our nation. On this show, we break down current affairs, public issues with clarity and depth. I'm your host, Ruben Abati. Today is International Women's Day. And in honor of International Women's Day 2025, we explore the theme, Accelerate Action, Empowering Women for a Sustainable Future. We'll look into the current status of women's political representation in Nigeria, compare it with other African nations, examine the barriers to women's leadership, and assess also the progress made over the past 30 years since the Beijing Declaration in 1995. Our guest is Dr. Abiola Akiode Afolabi, leading voice for women's rights. She's a Nigerian lawyer, feminist scholar, civil rights activist, with about 30 years of advocacy for women's rights, governance, and justice. She is the founder of Women Advocates Research and Documentation Center, WADRIC, and has been instrumental in shaping gender policies, legal reforms, and anti-sexual harassment laws in Nigeria. A former students leader, she has led major movements like #BringBackOurGirls and the 2022 Women's March for Constitutional Reform, demanding gender equality in politics and governance. She also serves on the boards of WANEP and the Nigerian Women's Trust Fund, and she teaches international humanitarian law at the University of Lagos. Despite facing threats, she remains a fearless advocate, pushing for women's leadership, legal protection, and justice. Her work has earned her numerous awards and recognition as one of Nigeria's most influential voices for gender equality. Now to the topic. Now, as at 2024, women's representation in Nigeria's political landscape remained alarmingly low. Women occupied approximately 4% of Senate seats and 7.3% of the House of Representatives seats, falling significantly short of the African Union's target of 30% female representation in governance. Nigeria remains the only West African nation that is yet to meet the African Union's target of 30% female representation in governance. So this overview of women's representation in Nigeria's leadership and politics and governance outlines the stark underrepresentation of women in Nigerian politics. Despite having 36 states and even clamoring for the creation of more states, Nigeria is yet to elect a female governor. This absence underscores the systemic barriers that women face in ascending to top political positions. At the 10th National Assembly, at the Senate, Nigeria has only 4 female senators. One of them has now been sent on suspension for the next 6 months. And then we have 16 female House of Representatives, out of the 469 National House of Representatives. This is considered worrisome. Then at the state level, women's representation in houses of assembly also remains critically low, further highlighting the need for targeted interventions to promote gender inclusivity. There are only 55 women in the state legislative assemblies in Nigeria at this moment. In contrast, several African nations have made notable strides in women's political representation. Rwanda leads, with women holding 63.13% of parliamentary seats. South Africa and Senegal also boast substantial female representation, with 46% and 43% respectively. These figures highlight Nigeria's lag in achieving gender equality in political offices. 30 years after the adoption of the historic blueprint for gender equality at the Beijing Conference in 1995, women's rights are reportedly under attack. A recent UN report indicates that nearly a quarter of governments around the world have reported setbacks in women's rights, and gender discrimination remains deeply entrenched in global economies and societies. While there have been some advancements in education and family planning, violence against women and girls has escalated, with a 50% increase in conflict-related sexual violence since 2022. There have been publications and opinion on barriers to women leadership in Nigeria. And some of these factors are cultural and religious norms, economic constraints, political violence and intimidation, party dynamics. Well, having given that introduction, it's now time for me to welcome our guest for joining us today, Dr. Abiola Akinode Afolabi. And if you want to join the conversation, call us at 0700 1051 1051 and WhatsApp at 0909 916 4403. And you can also reach out to us on our social media accounts at City 1051 on Zoom, Instagram, and Facebook. Well, Dr. Abiola Akinode Afolabi, thank you very much for joining us on the program, and let me wish you and all the women at home and those who are listening to us and everywhere happy International Women's Day, August 8th. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abati, and one welcome to you also. Thank you so much for inviting me to this program.
Okay, Dr. Afolabi, it was Putin, I think, in 1922, Russian leader of the revolution, who decided that March 8th should be dedicated to women. Women who took part in the October Revolution of 1917. And then since then, the United Nations in 1997 adopted March 8th as International Women's Day to push the envelope for gender equality, gender equity, gender justice, and all of that. And in 1995, we had Beijing Plus 5. But the Beijing Declaration. And since then, we have had Beijing Plus 5, Beijing Plus 10. This year, we're having Beijing Plus 30. So for over a century, for over 30 years, there's been an attempt at the centering of women issues in global politics. How much progress have we made? When we look back a century, the last 30 years, do you think we've fared well? How far have we traveled on that subject?
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and to all those who are also viewing, may I say Happy International Women's Day. I think the Women's Day should actually be every day because of the challenge that we face, on daily basis. And maybe if we do that, would have been able to address some of the problems that we have currently. And I thank you for tracing the history of International Women's Day. So we have come a long way, and we have come this far. But apparently there are still a lot, that we need to do to be able to get to the place where we're supposed to get to. So let me first focus on Nigeria. Since, and I would try to speak between 1999 and now. When we started off in 1999 advocating for expansion of the rights of women and more recognition and political will towards the rights of women. If we recall, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women was passed since 79, and Nigeria endorsed it around 1981. So meaning that we have a basis upon which we should advocate and ask for more things to be done, by the government with respect to the rights of women. In 2005, Nigeria also led other countries, about 54 African countries, also signed what they call the Maputo Protocol, which is adjudged as the best all over the world. It's one regional protocol that has come up to speak favorably about issues of women, and of course looking at our context from the point of view of Africa. So in Nigeria, I think to follow suit, in 2006, so a national gender policy was signed, which was supposed to derive some commitment from that international, and that national policy was also reviewed in 2021. So meaning in terms of policy and laws, there has been some kind of improvement in what we are doing as a country. And I know that as of 1999, we didn't have the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. So now we have it in 2015, although it took us 13 years, to be able to get there. So in some states, I think, and it's important to call out the state, in Plateau State of recent, they had passed what the National Assembly had rejected, which is the Gender and Equal Opportunity Bill. So it was passed in Plateau State, and Plateau State went further also to start what is called a Gender Commission. But of course, that is yet to take ground. So those are some of the improvements. But of course, these improvements are significant, but they are still not a huge contribution to what you would expect in terms of addressing issues of women. There are still challenges, and the challenges are abound, from gender-based violence to women political participation, women insecurity with respect to women not being part of decision-making in peace keeping, issue of sexual harassment, and quite a whole lot of other things which I believe this program will respond to. So, but I am just using this as an opening comment to say, yes, there's been progress, but I'm not sure that we can really rate ourselves high. I don't think we are 30. I don't think we're up to 30% in terms of what you expect the country, to have done.
Okay, Dr. Folabi, I'm very glad that you started with Nigeria. After all, they say charity begins at home. So as you celebrate International Women's Day, it's most appropriate that you reflect on the Nigerian situation. Now, the theme for today's action, for today's International Women's Day, is Accelerate Action, which says, okay, we have talked enough for 30 years. Let us begin to act. Now, if you look at its statistics, in August, I think, the 2024 report by the Global Gender Gap Index, 18th edition, they called it. They indicated that Namibia is at number 8 in terms of achievements in Africa. South Africa, 18 in terms of achievements with gender equality. Rwanda at 39. Liberia at 46. Eswatini at number 47. Nigeria is not anywhere among the first 50 countries either in the world or even in Africa. We have one of the lowest numbers of women in political leadership in Africa. We have just 4 senators out of 109. One of them has been suspended. Maybe 14 female representatives in the House of Representatives. The number is even more, alarming at the level of the state legislatures. So why have we been so slow as Nigeria in terms of advocacy and achievement? And Nigeria, has been at every conference since Beijing Declaration. We have been there. We are always present. You yourself led protest on the issue of the national gender policy. You even led women to go to court. So what is the problem in this country that we talk, there's no action? Today's issue is accelerate action. How do we accelerate action? And then what are the challenges that you have been facing as a prominent leader of women issues in Nigeria?
Yeah, thank you very much. So let me start with the problems we are facing. I think the major problem is that the government has not prioritized women's issue. So for the laws that they have passed, there is no political will to even make it happen. So none of the laws can be rated as any one of them properly done, by the government. So there's an issue of political will. If you look at the budget, for example, the budget does not speak to gender, so it's more interested in other things. So it will be very difficult when you are not intentional, in addressing the problem that is seen as a very difficult problem. So there is need to invest more, in addressing gender inequality in this country. So laws alone, maybe Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, which is the only law that stood out, that has been made, it's not enough. There are steps that are expected to be taken by the government in addressing the problem. There are issues of religion, there are issues of tradition, there are issues of culture. But where the government is also has a body language, that addresses some of these problems, we will not have it the way it is. Female genital mutilation is still a big issue. There are also instances where there are other obnoxious practices that are still happening in this country. And this is a country that we have so-called law and we have state. The widowhood practice is still there. There are a lot of traditional issues affecting women, and then subjugating them and not allowing women to be able to participate in public, as it is expected to. But what the government is doing is looking away. So in order to address this, and if you look at in those countries that we're talking about, whether it's Uganda, whether it's Rwanda, or Namibia, the government cannot continue to look away. The government must also take steps in ensuring, whether it's economic empowerment, ensuring we have the highest maternal mortality in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. So what that means is that women are dying in droves. We also have one of the highest indicator of out-of-school children. So and amongst them, we have girls as more. So there are fundamental issues that need to be addressed. And the government is not addressing those issues. And that is why our indicators are not showing, as if, we are moving anywhere. So if we then want to accelerate, there are things we need to do. We need to go back to drawing board. A lot of things are happening. There's a need to increase. There are just four women in the National Assembly, and you are suspended one. So we have 3 left, in the Senate. So we need to do what is done in other countries. We need to step back and look at. We need to address things from our constitution. We say have a constitution that is not even sensitive, doesn't see me, as a citizen, as like every other person. So if our major document that is also supposed to be a grand norm for this society is also defective in terms of ensuring that there's a gender equality. Then there's still a major problem. The labor force is also not friendly. The data that is coming out from there is not showing, that we are serious about also ensuring that women get into the world of work. So these are some of the issues. So the government needs to do more. Be intentional about addressing this issue. We need to do a lot of data gathering. There are a lot of assumptions in our data. And so our data is driven by patriarchal understanding of data. So the history of women is not even told. The efforts that they have made, even to contribute to Nigeria, also is not told. When you talk about independence, you hear about it now, you don't hear about the women who are present there. So there is a deliberate attempt to suppress women who have voice, women who are speaking out, and we can see that happening, on daily basis. So there must be an intentional way of resolving this. The government must be ready to address women's health, women's education, and a whole lot of. And must understand that we are coming from the perspective that we are 50% in this country. So government cannot, face a side of the country without resolving that global problem. So the government must be holistic, in addressing. But unfortunately, there are so many things that are affecting us. Corruption is one, and so that can, when you look at women's health, maternal mortality, you will see that also coming, from that. The issue of women and poverty, which the government has also not done. 70% of women who till the ground in informal sector in agri, and there are women, and there's no empowerment whatsoever, even for us to be able to guarantee food security. The conflict is affecting women differently. Government is also not seeing that when they address the issue of insecurity. So the knowledge that women have, to be able to address insecurity in their area, is also not being explored. So there are so many potentials that women have that the government has failed, to tap into. So until when we come back to drawing board and take up all those issues, that's when we can, begin to accelerate women issues.
Okay, Dr. Akiode Afolabi, I like the way you have focused on the Nigerian situation. I would like to ask you two questions. One, about the national gender policy. This country passed the policy that there should be 35% women representation. And I think you led the process of going to court and saying that policy must be implemented. What is the status of that struggle in the law courts now? And two, we have a living topical example of the travails of Senator Natasha Akpoti Uduaghan in the National Assembly. Some women, I don't say all women, have constructed that as a feminist cause, showing that women are being discriminated against. Even the Ministry of Women Affairs is now saying, we have only 4 women in the National Assembly. You cannot remove one of them without looking at the basic issues that led to this situation. I'd like you to comment on those two issues: national gender policy and Akpoti Uduaghan versus Akpabio, or Akpabio versus Akpoti Uduaghan, whichever way is
yes, on the national gender policy, the government went into the process of making a gender policy, and of course it's derived from section 42, which talks about non-discrimination and other part of the Constitution. And so a policy was made that speaks to 35% affirmative action in appointed position. And so which goes back to the point about whether the government has the will, and whether the government is even looking at this document or documents that they sign, to promote gender equality, as a country. So the government then made appointments, and women are not there. And I could recall that one of the reasons why we went to court was because they had the INEC state commissioners, and they had just about 2 or 3 women there. And we raised that point to say, no, this cannot continue to happen. You have a gender policy that you are supposed to follow, as a country. Now, we went to court, and the judgment was clear. The judgment says that the government should ensure that they are able to meet up with the 35% affirmative action. And the second day, the government had gone to court to appeal. So we're still in the court of appeal. And we do hope that at the end of the day, that judgment will become a precedent that will be able to address the issue of 35% affirmative action in appointed positions in Nigeria, and that could also influence some of the discussions that we're having, at the National Assembly on the need to have reserve seats and to expand the space, for women. Now, having said that, now on the issue of gender bills, and let me now go a little bit outside of air and speak about, other countries. Of recent, in 2012, Kenya had amended its constitution and had included what we call the gender two-third rule, which allows for at least 30% of women, in political position. And these are also the people in Kenya and in the assembly were men who made those conversations. So one of the challenges we're having here also, it's the fact that we have the wrong kind of people in the National Assembly.
You mean we have the wrong kind of men? Is that what you're saying?
The wrong kind of men, yes, in the National Assembly. And we can see in a whole lot of things that we see. They are misogynists. They are people who are born of patriarchy, so they are patriarchists, and they just want to keep and maintain. And when you hear the conversation, even on affirmative action, the question they ask you, as someone who has been negotiating and lobbying for this, is that whose seat do you want to take? Whose seat do you want women, to take? So it's the conversation has not shown that we really have the right kind of people who have interest in developing this country, and that's why it became very difficult. For example, the gender bills, we had conversation with the Conference of Speakers, we had conversation with the Senate, we had conversation with the House of Rep, and at a point in time, someone said, we have agreed with it, because for the 5 gender bills, to even pass through the initial conversation to get to a level where votes have to be made on them, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of engagement. We met them at their Central District. We had conversations with them, and when they got to the National Assembly, it became like there was a joke on the floor. As they speak about the women issues, you see them laughing and just say no, and that was particularly in the House of Rep, and that's how that gender bills was thrown out. Now it has been repackaged. We're talking about reserve seats. We're talking about other issues, and of course, some of the issues they are saying, okay, let the issue of citizenship, let it go like a general human rights conversation. Let the issue of, so gradually, some of the key issues that we are raising with the 5 gender bills, they are taking them away and then putting forward the reserve seats. And of course, the way it is being also represented also calls for a lot of caution. The numbers are being reduced. Initially, it was supposed to be 111. Seats, but gradually it's becoming, conversation for 78 seats and what have you. Now, from what we can see in the National Assembly, it's obvious that we really need to push and stand, for us to even be able to get, the reserve seat as it is being talked about. And let me also say, the reserve seat by any standard has not met what they have in Rwanda's constitution, has not met what we have in Uganda's constitution. Uganda's constitution is very clear about 30%. Rwanda said 30%. And people must be able to also understand that when a reserve seat is asked for, it's a temporary measure. It is not supposed to be forever. In a place like Uganda, the constitution was clear. The constitution says 20 years, then we revise or we review it. So what we're having in Nigeria is far, far lesser, than what other countries have been able to do.
Dr. Akiode Afolabi, I wanted you to comment on Akpoti versus Akpabio. Akpabio versus Akpoti.
All right.
Your
So
thoughts.
it's important because one, I've done a lot of intervention around the issue of sexual harassment. I understand how this is. And I feel that's where the problem is, because there's a lot of pressure asking Napoti to come and give evidence, and of course we see a lot of people also normalizing sexual harassment. And you see that coming from like former Senator Olujimi said, oh, he jokes a lot. And you hear Madam Itagiwa also coming in that regard to say, oh, when you are in the National Assembly, you have become a man. because that's what I hear her saying. You cannot be harassed by anybody or whatever. So she has come up with all that, manner of conversation, which I think is very derogatory. Sexual harassment is a very sensitive matter. And for those who understand sexual harassment, it has a lot to do with issues of power dynamics. The position that you are in. If you look at some of the comments we have been airing, sir, the Senate president is a sir, even from Okoyemi Damide, I said, sir, do you? So there is a power play there. There is a power play there. And of course, there are so many things that comes into sexual harassment. It is different from other kind of harassment, and we need to get that clearly. Sexual harassment oftentimes is coded. It might not be something that you have a witness standing by you. You can be in the same car and somebody is sexually harassing you, and there can be other people in that car without knowing. So we need to first get that, and so that's why the history of the perpetrator matters. Whether that perpetrator has been accused before of sexual harassment. And of course, the other thing about sexual harassment is also the community acquiescence of it. So when you raise it, the first thing is, oh, did it happen? How? What is your evidence? And we see that playing out, in Natasha's case. Everybody is asking her, oh, she doesn't have evidence and all of that. But that is not the issue. Sexual harassment is not in that kind of formulation. But I argue, that whether he jokes a lot or whatever, but the most important is it is the person that is being harassed that can claim sexual harassment. We can't sit there and be assuming what happened between Natasha and Akpabio on the day that Natasha was talking about. It is very wrong, for us to sit there and say that. And so the only thing we can also rely on is that this is not the first time that Akpabio is being accused of sexual harassment, and there has been several times, and I'm sure more will come out because it has become a pattern. And that is why, as a country, it's number 3 person. It shouldn't have sat in judgment against somebody who has accused him of harassment. Every responsible nation, Akpabio is expected to step down on that day and allow the deputy senate president. What does it cost him? Especially if you have nothing to hide. How can you be a judge in your own case? And you can see, and this is not the first time. Because one of the problems here is also that we are legitimizing gender-based violence, in the country, especially if it's happening from the National Assembly. It is not the first time that this is happening. Dino Melaye had done that to Senator Oluremi, Senator Dino had done that to Senator Oluremi, and nothing happened. This is also going to happen, and they want us not to speak. So it is important that National Assembly must show example, and they must also show respect for rule of law. So if there is a court order, you cannot say because there are 3 arms of government, and so what? But there is a court order, and you are expected, to be one of the arms of government. So it has nothing to do with separation. So reading it as a separation of power or check and balances thing doesn't really come into play. You would have expected that a responsible leadership would, take that court order. So what are they in a hurry? Who is afraid of who? Who is afraid of Natasha? So there are a lot of issues coming out from there. And what this is also showing is that we have a serious systemic governance, problem. That this form of leadership that we have in National Assembly, may not be able to, address our problem. And what are they saying? They're saying it's a distraction. They want to focus on other issues. No, you can't focus. Our issues as women can never be a distraction. There are issues that are important. Issues of sexual harassment, gender-based violence, that are issues that should be top, priority for, any government. And that's why we are making our demands. Our demand is that Akpabio should step down. We should step down and allow proper independent investigation on this matter. So it is not Natasha that they are saying. They are saying all the women in Nigeria that have been abused, and violated, and they have no voice. It takes a long time for someone who is violated to speak out, and that is why it might have taken Natasha that long time to speak out. It might have taken her a time to even tell her husband, because of the circumstances of sexual harassment. In one of the parliaments in East Africa, they realize that when any man comes in, they scratch their hand. They shake you and scratch your hand. And the women decided and say, when next any of these men come in and they try to scratch my hand, I will say, Honorable so is scratching. Honorable so, I think we need to get to that level, in Nigeria. But unfortunately, there are just 4 of them, 4 women there. So I am sure this would, if this is well treated, it will go a long way to send good, message to the National Assembly that things has to be done right. National Assembly has no sexual harassment policy. And they're asking her to formalize it. Even during Mrs. Oludremi Tinubu travel in the National Assembly, and I was quite involved because I went to demonstrate there. I went to demonstrate in the National Assembly, and I had the opportunity of discussing with her. And she told me that when she went to report to Senator Saraki, there was actually no formal way of reporting. And by the time she got there, the men were just laughing, and she could not even make a report. So what are we talking about? How could Natasha make a report? So there is still no formal way, there's no procedure, and I challenge them. Let them bring out any policy in the National Assembly that speak particularly to how to report when sexual harassment, when you experience sexual harassment. So if there's no law, if there's no order, what then you are talking about formalization? She has done what she has to do, and that is to speak out, and she has spoken out. So it is the responsibility of the National Assembly to treat a matter and appoint a independent investigation on that matter, and then address it as a national issue.
Okay, well, Dr. Akiode Afolabi, I get all your points. It's very clear that Nigerians want the issue of misogyny, sexual harassment, the treatment of women in political representation to be addressed. But you recall, just to balance the conversation, that the Senate President pointed out that, well, he has the right under the rules and under the laws to preside over proceedings of the National Assembly. And that's why he could not possibly have stepped down. You also know, as an officer in the Temple of Justice, that there are issues about the granting of ex parte injunctions. Those are issues that some people may well raise. You also know that Senator Akoti Uduaha has the right to enforce our fundamental human rights. She can always go to court. And that the court can also decide on its own to charge anybody for contempt, even if it cannot dictate to the legislature. But where fundamental human rights have been violated, the court has a right to say, well, you have abused this person's right. So it's a whole complexus of many issues. And these are matters that can go on forever, all the way to the Supreme Court. But it's important that on International Women's Day, we're emphasizing, the rights of women, political representation, and recognizing that the population of Nigeria is made up of 50% men, 50% women. But beyond that, before we open the lines, because on this program we also allow people who are listening to contribute, I'd like to ask you, is there a role that political parties can play better in terms of women representation in Nigerian politics? In the past, they would say, women can collect free forms. They can do this, do that. We want to encourage, but it looks that has not made any difference. How can we empower Nigerian women in politics?
The political parties in other countries have actually played roles. In most of the countries in Latin America, what they have done is to designate a particular percentage, to women, and we have seen quite, a lot of developments in that regard. We have also seen where political party can, agree within, and that was one of the things that the gender bills was also speaking about. One in terms of leadership in political party, and also ability of political parties to be able to make some of those decisions. So the political parties in Nigeria can do that, and make it possible for more women, to appear, to contest elections. But we know that the way the arrangement, because we can't put something on nothing, the arrangement of political parties in Nigeria may not be able, to allow, such to happen. So, and that's why it is important to come through the Constitution. We have had opportunities of speaking with leaders of political parties, and I could remember that one of the conversations where former Minister Lai Mohammed was, it was clear to them that this might not be possible. There are a lot of issues with Nigerian political party. There is internal party democracy. They are still fighting and trying to get their own share. So it might be very difficult for them to allow for gender discussion. So what do we hear from them? Oh, these people are not sellable and all of that. So it might be a very difficult thing. But and that is why the constitution can be to the rescue. And in all other countries where we have seen increase, whether it's Rwanda, whether it's Uganda, whether it's South Africa, whether it's Kenya, all these countries had gone through the constitution. So, and that's why we feel that the constitution will be the way out. So as the political party is in Nigeria, it might be a very difficult thing. There has been a lot of things they put in there. If you look at their manifestos, you will see gender equality promotion. You will see a whole lot of other things. So we have taken our time to read through it. So it's not like they also don't have policy that could assist them, in increasing the number of women, but they have not, worked with it. So apparently, it's obvious that we need something that is stronger that can bind all of us.
Okay, on this note, Dr. Akyode Afolabi, let's take a short break. When we return from the break, we'll invite other persons to be part of the conversation. For those of you who are just tuning in, we've been discussing International Women's Day. Today is International Women's Day, and the theme is Accelerate Action. How do we empower women for a sustainable future? We'll go on this short break, and you can join us by calling 0700 1051 1051. You can also send us messages via WhatsApp at 0909 916 4403. And you can also engage with us via our social media accounts at City 1051 on Zoom, Instagram, and Facebook. Let's take this short break, and then we'll be right back. Dr. Abiola Akyode Afolabi, lawyer and civil rights activist, is our guest. We'll be right back.
Most of the contracts in NDDC are given out to members of National Assembly, but you don't know about it. It's okay.
When you need unbiased information, balanced analysis, reviews, and insight on the policies and programs that concern you, listen to City Talks with Ruben Abati. Be a part of it. Call 0700 1051 1051 to lend your voice on topics and help shape our country for the better.
My name is Ruben Abati. I will be your host on City Talks from noon to 1 p.m. every Saturday. Join me as we dissect major issues of public interest. You will be glad you did.
City Talks with Ruben Abati on your number one lifestyle station, City 1051. From noon to 1 p.m. every Saturday.
Welcome back from that commercial break. For those of you who are just joining us, our guest discussing International Women's Day is Dr. Abiola Akyode Afolabi. She's a lawyer. She's a civil rights activist. She's also a scholar. And she's been in this struggle forever. But very quickly, you can join us again by calling 0700 1051 1051. You can join us via WhatsApp 0909 916 4403 and on social media platforms through at City 1051. But very quickly, I see Dr. Boniface Chizia has his hand up on WhatsApp. I also see Dr. Ononamudu Emeka also has his hand up. If you can quickly start with, persons who have joined us via Zoom, Dr. Boniface Chizia. Doctor, thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Ruben. Thank you. You've been away for quite some time. Well, okay. I think that your guest has spoken well. Apparently, she's been in this fight for some time. So we wish her the best of luck. That's not an easy fight, to take on. But I think she said a few things that I think we need to correct. I don't think that's intentional. I think that there's some contestation it's not quite there. People are not conscious You cannot undermine the women folk. It's like trying to clap with one hand. It's not going to work. So I think that what we need to do is to drum up the consciousness so that we begin to appreciate the fact that we undercut ourselves overall if we try to undermine our women folk. So I think that's the message you have to send out there. But it's going to be a tough thing because there's so many things involved in that fight. So you have traditional practices and so on that go back to how our female folks have been treated and so on, from time immemorial. So I think there are general issues, but I think that it's not intentional, but I think that something needs to be done. I stand with her. I think that we need to put it in the Constitution. This is very important. We put it in the Constitution so that, the political parties will come and make promises, and when it's time for them to implement, and since, in fact, our votes don't count in this environment, they do whatever they want to do. So, but if you put it in the Constitution and it becomes a law, and then, so then the bounds for the fight will be better defined. So that's the first point, Ruben. The other point is about Natasha. Natasha Aboki, well, she's my friend on Facebook. But I think that there are issues there that, I go by what we read in social media. Has she been with Akpabio for that long? Has she been with Akpabio since he was in Niger Delta Development Corporation? Did she receive a contract of 7 billion naira? Let's begin to look at this things properly. So I just say I don't know what the facts are. If that is the case, then there's more to this that meets the eye. So we need to look at it carefully. Now, when you look at the issues here, you look at what the Senate is saying. People tend to, the Senate are saying that she breached Senate rules. What people are just concentrating on sexual harassment. That's another matter. There's a rule of the Senate that says if you are assigned to a seat, and then you want to contribute, you have to speak, can only speak from where you have been assigned to, and that's the basic rule. And I'm sure she knows that. So maybe she didn't keep to the rules, and then she started the fight and so on. I think that the punishment she's receiving, whether rightly or wrongly, I'm sure that at the end of the day, what justice would prevail. Is the rules, but most people are going on about sexual harassment. And when you look at sexual harassment, you look at Akpabio, he has a record. You look at Natasha also, you look at Lionel Mokri, what she said about her, how she accused him before and so on and so forth, and what's happened. I think that's a bit complicated. Ruben, let me allow us to contribute. Thank you very much.
Very quickly, thank you very much, Dr. Boniface Chizia, and thank you for keeping faith with this program. Dr. Emeka, Dr. Onuna Madu Emeka, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Bati, and thank you, Abiola, for that very insightful presentation. Each time we talk about women, I feel a little sober because most people don't know or seem to undermine the depth of the challenges Nigerian women are facing. Whenever I want to talk, I feel emotional because sometimes I look at what my daughters are going to face in the near future, whether in politics or in professional life. These are our mothers, our wives, and our cousins. That should not happen at all in any sense society. Let me take this last caller's point and move from there. It is not that Natasha never and did not violate any house rule. Because in that rule, it is said that immediately you relocate somebody from her seat, you notify her. She was not notified. You can imagine somebody of that status walking to her seat and start scrambling and looking for where her new seat is. It's demeaning, it's demoralizing, it's embarrassing, and in fact, it's ignominious. Nobody is saying, I have been listening to the arguments and the discussion. Nobody is saying the Senate president violated the rules he is supposed to do what? Implement. And what is the rule? The rule, if you check that section, I think section 6 or 3 or thereabout, that section say you need to notify somebody you've moved from her seat. And there was no record that woman was notified in any way whatsoever. So what are we talking about? And why are we sidestepping that issue? It is also the indirect way of protecting the Senate president. We're in a deep pit as a nation when it comes to morals and governance. And in other climes, he is not supposed to be in that because he also violated the rules, and that can need to be re-emphasized time and over. I
Okay.
think you'll have not seen and heard from her for a very long
Okay,
time.
Dr. Noah
Hearing
Namadu.
her is more reassuring.
Dr. Noah Namadu, thank you. But let's listen very quickly to Dr. Olabisi Mekwenye, who also has a hand up. Dr. Mekwenye Olabisi. Doctor, if you could just go ahead very briefly so that Dr. Afolabi can respond and we can take calls. The dashboard there is blinking. Dr. Mekwenye Olabisi, please.
Thank you, everybody. Good day, everyone. Our general is in the house. General, we hail you. I just want us to go back to the drawing board. You know, they say charity begins at home. It is high time we go back to the basics. Let us go back home and begin to teach our children to respect women and begin to make chores that are for male the same thing that for female. We should not give our male children priority over our female children. I think when we start from the basics, when we start from the home, our children will grow up to know that there's no favoritism that is given to the boy child, but all the children are equal. I think when we do that, they will grow up into the society to be respecters of women. And also gender policy is very, very important. All organizations should have gender policy. Not only, when we are talking about gender, we are not talking about women alone, because also some men also are violated. So gender policy is very important in our places of work so that it will guide our actions. Thank you very much, Dr. Akiode and Dr. Abati. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, Dr. Akiode, if you could just respond to these three interventions from Dr. Mekwenye, Dr. Onunamadu, and also Dr. Chizia. They've raised quite a number of issues. Dr. Chizia saying this issue is complicated. Women's rights have to be recognized. Senate rules also have to be paid attention to. And then the perspectives from Dr. Emeka Onunamadu saying no rules have been, broken by Senator Akuti Udwa, and then the intervention by Dr.
Okay. All right. So let me first. Thank you very much, Dr. Ruben. Yeah. So one of the things that is because when there are issues like this, it's also important for the country to learn. One of the things that is coming up from here is that the Senate rule is also quite defective. It's not only Natasha that has been in this kind of position before, where you want to speak and you cannot also respond when you think that an injustice is being meted to you. Now, from my understanding, there are processes of taking people from one seat to another seat. One, the chief whip or the clerk needed to, inform her. And when there's a shift in your seat, it also affects because people sit according to political parties and leaning. So it will also affect, the shift of others. So what she saw on that day, she was only the one that is being singled out, for that shift. So, and what she was doing, we can't say people don't have right to protest. So what she did on that day was to protest, to say, why is this happening to me? And so the question of the language that was used, by the Senate president, was also a language that is quite derogatory, that you should not expect that anybody in that red chamber should use Natasha. I will ask them to work here and things like that, which was enough to provoke anybody. So it is not only the fact that they didn't follow the due process in assigning her. You can't just come, you sit here normally every day. Then you come back tomorrow. Then your seat is shifted and nobody tells you why or what. So you have a right, to be, and that was what happened to even Akpabio himself before. So if they have some defects in their rules, they should go and sort it out. But due process must be followed. Natasha on that day was not informed about a seat that was going to be shifted, until when she got there on that day. And we all have constitutional right, to protest. And that was exactly what she did. So where the protest is happening does not matter. Whether it happened at the National Assembly or in front of the gate of National Assembly. And that's what I would say about that. Yes, there are a lot of issues. There are issues of culture. And there are issues of respect for one another. It's smart economics for any country to invest in girls, to invest in boys. So if we have a country that has failed to invest in girls, the country is going to have the kind of indicators that we have in the country. And I think when we then begin to talk about issue of acceleration, those are the issues that we need to consider. What are we doing in terms of investment in girls? What are we doing in terms of investment in women? So that the country GDP can move forward. Our failure to do that is the reason why, our economy is in problem, and our development is also in question. That will be my answer for the comments that we have.
Okay.
And I agree with Mrs. Mekwe. Yes, it's important because I'm sure maybe if we have been doing that enough, we wouldn't have the bunch of people, misogynists that we have in the National Assembly. They'll probably understand how to respond, to women better. She's not the first one. There are stories, there are cases, and that's why it's important for them, to take it very seriously. We haven't had anything from the House of Rep, but apparently that such behavior is also happening. So we need to look at the power arrangement in that place and respect for one another.
Okay, looks like we have a caller on the line, and the dashboard there has been blinking. Hello, your name, your location, and please keep it brief. Hello. Okay, we lost that caller, but very quickly we have via WhatsApp Ayo from Ogba, and he's saying, "Good afternoon. Senator Natasha should have seen this coming before coming to the public and saying what happened between her and the Senate President. She should have submitted to the Ethics Committee. Although I'm not in support with the Senate, I'm not in support of the Senate President." Ayo from Ogba, here in Lagos. Now we have the caller back on the line. Hello. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hello. Okay, the caller there is missing it, but as we begin to wrap up, now specifically, I would like to ask you, Dr. Akiode Afolabi, what do you think should be the next steps forward, both for the international community and for the Nigerian government, or perhaps generally across all jurisdictions, in terms of women empowerment sustainably across the world, since today is International Women's Day?
I think we need to take a very holistic perspective in addressing women issues in Nigeria. We should invest more in ensuring that more girls go to school. So we should invest more in education. We should invest more in budgeting for issues that has to do with women. And we should ensure that we have we reorientate our public service, in such a manner that they can also have what we call gender lens when they are making their decisions on issues in this country. We cannot continue to wear a blind eye and not seeing the other side, in whatever we're doing. We should mainstream, gender in governance. That would, to a large extent, support whatever we're to do to accelerate action, for sustainable development for women. Julius Nyerere once said that you cannot walk, on one leg comfortably. So we need to ensure that, we deal with the men and women in the country in an equal and non-discriminatory manner, so that they can live happily and, contribute to sustainable development in this country.
Well, on that note, I would like to thank you very much, Dr. Abiola Akiode Afolabi, for joining us on this program, City Talks with Ruben Abati. As we commemorate International Women's Day, it's evident that while progress has been made, significant challenges remain in achieving gender parity in Nigeria's political sphere. Empowering women is not just a matter of equity, but a prerequisite for sustainable development. It is imperative for all stakeholders to accelerate action toward empowering women for a sustainable future. Thank you, Dr. Abiola Akeode Afolabi. And that's all we have on today's show. Thank you for joining us on City Talks. Let's all play our part in promoting gender equality and empowering women. To our listeners, thank you for joining us, and let's keep the conversation going on our social media platforms. And thank you also those who called in and everyone who engaged with us via Zoom and Facebook and WhatsApp. The conversation continues online. You can reach me on my personal Instagram page at Abati1990, and you can also follow at City1051 on all social media platforms. And for those of you who tuned in late, you can watch the full show on YouTube page City1051. And when you do so, don't forget to subscribe and leave your comments. And don't forget also to join us next week at 12 noon for another edition of City Talks. I'm Ruben Abati. And the show was produced by Kasmi Uzuribo, Oluwaseun Adetitun, Festus Odemero, Oluwatobiloba Samson, and Abiodun Adnuton. The executive producer is Adedoja Allen. Until next week, stay informed, stay safe. Thank you for listening. Have a great weekend. Bye for now.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.